Hello, I'm Promethea, you're watching Tyrannosaurus Girl, and today I'm answering the question why there seems to be more trans women than trans men. The asker goes on to say, if it's something natural, something biological, then shouldn't there be about the same amount? Well, first of all, we don't really know how many trans people are, how many trans women, or how many trans men, or non-binary people. The numbers that we have are not anywhere near precise, because it's very difficult to determine that in some countries more than others, but in general it is still taboo. So there are many people that are not open about being trans, whether they are still in the closet or because they have transitioned, they let go of everything in their past lives and they live in what we call stealth without telling anybody that they are trans, or perhaps only people in their very close circle. And there are many of us that distrust any type of authority, any type of institution. So many will never be recorded anywhere as being trans. So it is all about a certain word that you use in your question. There is a very key word here, which is seems. There seems to be more of one than the other. We don't know if it's true, but there are certain reasons why there seems to be more trans women. First of all, there is a matter of perception, of whether or not you realize that somebody is trans. Because it's not societally acceptable for men to wear women's clothing. When you see someone that you perceive to be assigned male at birth that is wearing women's clothing, your assumption is going to be that they are trans. If you see me in the streets, I have long hair, I wear earrings, I have breasts, I generally wear clothes that are clearly feminine. Maybe today is not the best example, but you don't need to be introduced to me, I don't need to tell you my name, you don't need to talk to me to perceive me as a trans woman. Not just that I'm assigned male at birth, but I am a woman. Some cis women that look like they could have been assigned male at birth also fall into that. However, because it is socially acceptable for women to wear men's clothes, if a transgender man does not pass, and you don't talk to him, you don't know his name, you don't know his history, you are not going to think that he is a trans man, you are just going to think that he is a woman that presents in a kind of masculine way. You are likely going to assume that he is a lesbian. You will only find out that he is trans if you approach him and you talk with him and he tells you, my name is Robert, or whatever. So there is that. The number of trans men that you are going to find out about is much lower than that of trans women. Then also there is the issue of how easy it is to pass. You know how I've said before that there aren't really that many differences when it comes to the face between male and female humans, except for facial hair, and most of the differences that we perceive actually are caused by makeup and by doing a decent job with makeup. So if you take makeup out of the equation, most people will be perceived as somewhat masculine or masculine, only by the face. Then another factor when we perceive someone's gender, other than the clothing and the face, is the voice. And see, testosterone is a very, very powerful hormone that does for trans men something that estrogen does not do for trans women. It changes the voice. It lowers their vocal register in a way that ours is not raised, and it does that relatively fast. The only option that we have is to train our voice to speak in a higher tone, or certain surgeries that are, first of all, very expensive. Second, there are not that many people that do them, and the most common type that is done is also very dangerous. It can potentially leave us without a voice at all. So not many people go for that surgery. The majority of trans men get a lower voice, they get more or less facial hair, also just by the hormones, whereas we have to go through a very long and expensive process of electrolysis and laser in order to remove our facial hair. So just by taking hormones and getting a mastectomy or at least binding, they tend to pass really well. So both passing and non-passing trans men generally fly under the radar for everybody unless they are open about it, unless they talk about it. And then there is one other aspect to take into account that may explain a certain difference in the numbers. It's more like a conjecture really. But you mentioned that transsexuality is biological, and that seems to be true. That is an explanation that is coming out from certain studies that have been done. There is a difference in the brain structure. However, gender is not biological. Gender is a social construct that we tend to classify as binary. However, the experience of gender is not binary. It's a continuum. You probably have heard of the Kinsley scale that establishes sexual orientation as a spectrum between completely straight all the way to completely gay. For gender, in the 60s, Harry Benjamin, a very renowned sexologist that was also one of the first people to study transsexuality, established the Benjamin scale that was aimed at classifying trans women specifically, also in a scale. Now that scale in particular is not considered valid. It has many flaws. It takes into account sexual orientation, which really has been shown not to have anything to do with gender identity. But the truth is that there is a whole spectrum between manly man and girly woman. But because we understand generally gender as something binary, like as if we have to draw a line in that, where in the side of that binary we understand ourselves to be has a lot to do with how we as individuals understand gender, how the society understands it, and a lot of other things. It's very complex. And in our patriarchal society, there seems to be like a slippery slope when it comes from man to woman, because there are so many things, so many aspects of presentation, of behavior that are considered strictly feminine, and because of that they are not acceptable for men. But on the other hand, there is a grey area of masculine behaviors, of masculine clothing that are acceptable for women to have. So there are many people who are not maybe that far into that scale towards masculinity, but that find a sweet spot in their gender presentation, still presenting themselves as women, that feel that they don't need to come out as trans, that feel that that is enough to calm their dysphoria, or many times also due to safety. Because really, coming out as trans is going to shake up everything in your life, and it is dangerous. So there are many trans men that prefer to navigate the world as a lesbian, because even though there is still so many negative attitudes against gay people, it is safer to be perceived as a lesbian than it is perceived to be as a trans man. And then of course, because our own perceptions of gender and that boundary between gender is determined by how the society that we grew up in understands gender, there may also be people that are in that grey area that don't seem to make that decision, whether if they were on the opposite case, if they were assigned male at birth, if they realized that there are so many things about their personality, about their attitude, about the things that they like, that they want, that are perceived as feminine. It's like these things are like signs that there is something with their gender identity that they need to look at. But again, don't take that as the truth, because that is just a conjecture. I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist yet. Maybe I will do a study about that in the future, but it is something that I perceived, that I think that makes some sort of sense, about a certain difference in the numbers, but really there are more trans men than you realize. You just don't see them. But well, thank you again for the question. It was a very interesting question. If you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. Leave me your comments as well as the questions that you want me to answer in future videos right here in the comments of the video, or through Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or ask.fm. And see you again next week. Bye bye!